Don't dig there, please. The little girl's voice came from behind him, soft but certain, like it didn't belong to the wind, and yet the wind carried it anyway. Daniel Brooks froze, one boot planted on uneven rock, the other shifting slightly as gravel slid beneath his weight. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the jagged terrain, turning the entire hillside into a place that felt older than it should have been. He hadn't planned to come out here today. Truth was, he hadn't planned much of anything since the letter arrived. Inheritance paperwork, a property he didn't remember anyone mentioning, described by the realtor as a useless hole in the rocks somewhere outside Flagstaff. Useless. That word had stuck with him longer than he cared to admit. Rex growled low beside him. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just aware. The kind of sound that made the back of Daniel's neck tighten without knowing why. Easy, boy, Daniel muttered, adjusting the worn strap of his canvas bag over his shoulder. Rex didn't move. The German shepherd stood locked in place, ears forward, eyes fixed on a jagged wall of stone about 20 yards ahead. The dog's posture wasn't curiosity. It was precision. Daniel had seen it before, overseas years ago, when dogs picked up something no human could see yet. A shift in air. A wrongness. Rex stepped forward, claws scraping lightly against the rock as he climbed the incline without hesitation. Then he stopped. One exact spot. Not left. Not right. Just there. He began to dig. Slow at first. Then faster. Dirt and loose stones scattered down the slope as his paws worked with a rhythm that didn't break, didn't question, didn't stop. Daniel frowned, stepping closer. Rex, what are you? He stopped mid-sentence. The sound. It wasn't just claws on dirt. There was something else beneath it. A hollow echo. Faint, but unmistakable. Daniel crouched, brushing his fingers along the surface where Rex had cleared away the top layer of dust and debris. The rock felt wrong. Too smooth in one place. Too flat. Like it had been shaped. That wall, it's not natural. The voice again. Behind him. Closer this time. Daniel turned sharply. A little girl. Stood a few feet away, no more than 8, maybe 9. Blonde hair tied into 2 uneven braids. A faded blue sweater that hung slightly too big on her shoulders. She wasn't out of breath. Wasn't startled. Just watching. Quiet. Calm. Like she had been there longer than he had. Daniel straightened slowly. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said, scanning the empty stretch of land behind her. No car. No trail. No sign of anyone else. The girl tilted her head slightly, her eyes shifting past him, back to the wall. Some things are buried, she said softly. Because someone was afraid. Rex barked once. Sharp. Focused. Then went right back to digging, faster now, as if something beneath the surface had called him by name. The wind picked up suddenly, sweeping across the rocks in a long, low whistle. Daniel felt it then. Not fear. Not exactly. But something close. Something that settled in his chest like a memory he couldn't quite reach. He looked back at the wall, at the precise place Rex refused to leave, at the thin layer of earth giving way to something solid beneath. And for the first time since stepping onto that useless piece of land, Daniel Brooks realized it was anything but. Daniel did not answer her right away. His eyes stayed on the patch of exposed surface where Rex had stripped away the dirt, revealing something that did not belong to nature. It was too clean, too deliberate, a faint line cutting across the stone like a boundary someone had once drawn and then tried to erase. You said it is not natural, Daniel said finally, his voice lower now, measured, careful. What do you mean by that? The girl stepped closer, her shoes making almost no sound on the gravel. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She simply moved as if she already knew where to stand. Rocks do not close things in, she said. People do. The wind shifted again, brushing past Daniel's shoulders, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and something older. Something buried long before he ever set foot here. Rex's digging intensified. His paws struck something harder now, a dull, hollow knock repeating beneath the rhythm of his movement. Daniel crouched again, brushing more debris aside with both hands this time. The surface widened. Flat. Uniform. A seam appeared, faint but undeniable, running vertically like the edge of a door that had been sealed and forgotten. That is concrete, Daniel murmured under his breath, more to himself than to her. Someone poured this. His pulse slowed, not from calm, but from focus. He had learned that kind of control years ago, in places where details meant the difference between walking forward and stopping just in time. Rex stopped suddenly. Not because he was tired, but because he had reached the limit. His nose hovered inches from the exposed section, ears twitching, body rigid. Then he looked up at Daniel. Waiting. Not asking. Waiting. Daniel exhaled slowly, wiping his hands against his jeans. All right, he said quietly. All right, I see it. He reached out and knocked against the surface with his knuckles. The sound came back immediately. Hollow. Not deep, not distant, but close. Whatever was behind that wall, it was not far. He knocked again. Same result. The air around them seemed to hold still, as if even the wind had paused to listen. Daniel leaned in closer, his fingers tracing the edge of the seam. There were no hinges. No visible handle. Just a clean, sealed line that had been meant to disappear into the surrounding rock. This was hidden on purpose, he said. Behind him, the girl nodded slightly. Yes. Daniel turned to her again, studying her more carefully now. Where are your parents? He asked. You should not be out here alone. This land is not exactly safe. The girl did not answer the question. Instead, her gaze drifted past him again, back to the wall. It has been here a long time, she said. Long enough for people to forget. But not long enough for everything inside to stay quiet. Daniel felt that same tightening in his chest again, sharper this time. Not fear. Not quite. Something closer to recognition, like hearing a voice from another room that you almost remember. Inside what? He asked. The girl met his eyes then, and for a moment, something in her expression shifted. Not childish. Not uncertain. Just steady. You already know it is not empty, she said. Rex let out a low, controlled bark, as if agreeing. Daniel looked back at the wall. The seam. The hollow sound. The precision. Nothing about this place was accidental. He stood up fully now, his posture changing, shoulders squaring in a way that felt instinctive rather than chosen. If someone went through the trouble to seal this, he said slowly, then they did not want it opened. Yes, the girl said softly. That is why it matters. The words settled between them, quiet but heavy. Daniel glanced down at Rex, then back at the wall. He could walk away. Call the county. Let someone else deal with it. That would be the logical choice. The safe choice. But Rex had not moved. The dog's focus had not broken once. And the girl, she had not asked him to leave. She had not even suggested it. She had only pointed to what was already there. Daniel took a step closer to the wall again, placing his palm flat against the cool surface. Solid. Real. Hidden. He swallowed once, the dry air catching in his throat. All right, he said, almost under his breath. Then we find out what it is. Behind him, the girl did not smile. She did not react at all. She only watched as the light shifted across the rocks, and somewhere in that stillness, it felt as though something long buried had just been given permission to be seen. Daniel did not move his hand right away. The surface beneath his palm felt colder than the surrounding rock, as if it had been holding on to something long after the sun had stopped touching it. He pressed a little harder, then dragged his fingers slowly along the seam, feeling for anything that might give, anything that might suggest where it began or where it ended. Nothing shifted. Nothing responded. It was sealed with intention. There has to be a way in, he said quietly, more certain now than before. Rex stepped closer, his nose brushing along the edge Daniel had just traced, then pulling back slightly as if something about the scent did not match the outside world. The dog circled once, then returned to the exact same point, placing his paw against the lower edge of the wall. Not random. Not guessing. The same spot again. Daniel watched carefully this time. "You found something," he murmured. He crouched lower, brushing away more loose dirt near the base. As the layer thinned, the shape became clearer. A faint indentation. Rectangular. About the size of a small panel. It had been covered deliberately, blended with dust and time until it almost disappeared. Almost. Daniel leaned closer, his heartbeat steady but heavier now, like each second carried more weight than the last. He cleared the rest of the dirt with both hands, revealing the outline fully. It was not part of the natural rock. It was embedded into it. "That is not just a wall," he said under his breath. "That is an entrance." Behind him, the girl spoke again, her voice calm, unchanged. "It does not open from the outside." Daniel paused. His fingers hovered over the panel. "Then how does it open?" he asked. The girl did not answer right away. When she did, it was softer than before. "It was meant to stay closed." The words settled into the space around them, quiet but final. Daniel exhaled slowly, then tapped the panel lightly. The sound was different from the rest of the wall. Sharper. Closer. Whatever mechanism had once been there, it was still connected to something behind it. Rex let out a low whine, stepping back half a pace, his body tense but not afraid. Alert. Waiting again. Daniel glanced at him, then back to the panel. "All right," he said. "We do this carefully." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small folding tool, the metal catching a brief flash of sunlight before fading back into shadow. He slid the edge gently along the seam of the panel, testing for any movement. At first, nothing. Then, a slight shift. Barely noticeable. But enough. Daniel stopped immediately. He did not force it. He adjusted the angle, applying just enough pressure to see if the movement would continue. It did. Slow. Resistant. But real. A thin line appeared along one side as the panel loosened from its place, releasing a faint breath of air from within. It was subtle, almost nothing, but Daniel felt it against his hand. Cooler. Still. Different from the dry wind outside. He froze for a moment, listening. No sound came from inside. No movement. Just silence that felt deeper than the open land around them. "There is space back there," he said quietly. The girl nodded once, as if that had never been in question. "Yes." Daniel pulled the panel back a fraction more. Enough to see darkness beyond it. Not a shadow cast by the sun. Not a shallow gap. Something deeper. Something that did not reflect light back at him at all. He swallowed, his grip tightening slightly on the edge of the panel. "Who built this?" he asked, though he was no longer sure he wanted the answer. The girl's gaze did not leave the opening. "People who did not want to be remembered," she said. Rex stepped forward again, but this time he did not try to dig. He simply stood beside Daniel, staring into the narrow opening, his body still and grounded, as if he understood that whatever came next required stillness, not force. Daniel took a slow breath, steadying himself, then pulled the panel just a little wider. The darkness inside did not change. It remained the same, waiting, silent, and untouched by the light of the outside world. And in that moment, Daniel understood something without needing to say it out loud. Whatever was behind that wall had not been lost. It had been left. Daniel held the panel steady, his fingers firm against its edge as if letting go too quickly might cause it to seal itself again. The opening was narrow, no more than a few inches at first, but it was enough to confirm what he already felt in his chest. There was space behind that wall. Real space. Not a crack. Not erosion. Something built. Something intentional. He leaned slightly closer, angling his head to catch any hint of detail inside, but the darkness did not cooperate. It did not soften. It did not shift. It simply absorbed the light and gave nothing back. "We are not going to rush this," he said quietly, almost as if the space beyond could hear him. Rex shifted his weight beside him, his shoulder brushing lightly against Daniel's knee. The dog's presence was steady, grounding, like an anchor in a place that did not quite feel right. Daniel reached back with one hand and rested it briefly on Rex's neck. Warm. Solid. Real. Then he let go and focused again. "We need more light," he said. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small flashlight, the kind he carried out of habit rather than expectation. He clicked it on, and a narrow beam cut through the late afternoon air before sliding into the opening. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the beam touched something inside. A surface. Flat. Smooth. Not rock. Not dirt. A wall. Another wall. But set back several feet from the first. "There is a chamber," Daniel said, his voice lower now, more certain. He adjusted the angle of the light, sweeping it slowly from left to right. The beam revealed edges. Corners. Straight lines that did not belong to nature. The space inside was larger than the opening suggested, extending deeper than he could fully see from where he stood. Rex let out a soft breath, not quite a growl, not quite a sigh, but something in between. He lowered his head slightly, ears still forward, eyes fixed on the darkness as if tracking something invisible. Daniel noticed the change immediately. "You hear something?" he asked quietly. Rex did not move. Daniel listened too. At first, there was only the wind behind them, brushing across the rocks in a low, steady hum. But beneath it, something else. Faint. Almost imagined. A subtle shift in the air, like a space that had not been opened in a very long time adjusting to the idea of being seen again. Daniel felt it more than he heard it. He drew back slightly, his grip tightening on the panel. "This was sealed for a reason," he said. Behind him, the girl's voice came again, calm and unchanged. "Yes." Daniel glanced over his shoulder. She had not moved. Not even a step. She stood exactly where she had before, her eyes steady, her posture relaxed, as if this moment had already happened in her mind long before it unfolded in front of him. "You knew this was here," Daniel said. It was not a question. The girl tilted her head slightly. "I knew something was waiting," she said. Daniel studied her for a second longer, then turned back to the opening. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in his hand, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was seeing. He widened the panel another inch, then another, until the gap was large. Enough to slide his arm through. Cool air brushed against his skin, sharper now, carrying a faint scent he could not immediately place. Not decay. Not dampness. Something older. Something preserved. He reached inside slowly, sweeping the light across the inner wall again. That was when he saw it. Markings. Not random. Not worn away. Clear enough to recognize. Letters. Numbers. Faded, but still there. His breath caught slightly as the beam settled over them. "That cannot be," he whispered. The arrangement was familiar. Not in detail, but in structure. A code. A designation. Something he had seen before, years ago, in a different place under very different circumstances. His mind pulled at the memory, trying to bring it forward, but it stayed just out of reach, like a word on the tip of his tongue. Rex took one step forward, then stopped again, his body aligned with Daniel's, both of them facing the opening as if standing at the edge of something that had been waiting for this exact moment. Daniel swallowed slowly, his eyes fixed on the markings inside. "I have seen this before," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Behind him, the girl finally took a small step forward, her voice softer now, almost like a whisper carried by the air itself. "I know," she said. The words settled into the silence, and for the first time since he arrived, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not confusion. Not curiosity. Recognition. And that made everything heavier than before. Daniel did not pull his arm back right away. The flashlight beam stayed fixed on the markings, his wrist steady despite the weight building in his chest. Letters and numbers. Clean lines. Structured. Not random. Not decorative. A designation. His mind moved through old patterns automatically, the way it used to when details mattered more than comfort. He traced the sequence silently with his eyes, breaking it apart, reassembling it, searching for recognition in pieces before seeing the whole. Then it clicked. Not fully. Not all at once. But enough to shift something inside him. That is a unit code, he said quietly, his voice tight with certainty he could not ignore. Rex lifted his head slightly, ears adjusting as if responding to the change in Daniel's tone. The dog did not bark. He simply stayed close, grounded, watching. Daniel leaned in a fraction more, angling the light to catch the rest of the wall inside. More markings appeared as the beam moved. Faded but consistent. Repeated patterns. Dates, maybe? Identifiers. The kind of information that was never meant to be seen by anyone who was not already part of it. His breath slowed. Not from calm, but from control. This is not random, he murmured. This was organized. Behind him, the girl's voice came again, softer now, almost blending into the air. Yes. Daniel swallowed once, his throat dry. I have seen this format before, he continued, his words more deliberate. Years ago. The memory pressed closer now, no longer distant. A briefing room. A whiteboard filled with similar codes. A voice explaining what they meant without ever saying too much. Compartmentalized. Controlled. You only know what you need to know. He exhaled slowly, pulling his arm back from the opening just enough to rest it against the edge. The cool air from inside brushed past his skin again, steady and unchanged, like the space beyond had not noticed the passage of time at all. This was not just sealed, Daniel said. It was documented. Catalogued. Rex shifted again, stepping half a pace closer to the opening, his body angled slightly as if listening from a different direction. Daniel noticed immediately. What is it? He asked quietly. Rex did not respond with sound. He simply focused, his gaze locked on the darkness, his breathing steady but alert. Daniel listened again. The wind had softened now, the late afternoon light dipping lower, stretching shadows longer across the rocks. The space around them felt quieter than before. Not empty. Just waiting. He glanced back at the girl. If this is what I think it is, he said, choosing each word carefully, then this place was not meant to be found by accident. The girl stepped 1 inch closer, her shoes barely shifting the gravel beneath her. It was not an accident, she said. Daniel studied her again, more intensely this time. Then why now? He asked. The question hung in the air between them, simple on the surface but heavier underneath. The girl did not answer right away. Her eyes moved from Daniel to the opening, then back again, as if measuring something unseen. Because you came back, she said. Daniel's brow tightened slightly. Back? He repeated. The word felt unfamiliar in this place, and yet something about it settled too easily. The girl held his gaze. You were here before, she said softly. Daniel shook his head almost immediately. No, he said. I would remember this. But even as he spoke, something in his tone shifted. Not doubt. Not fully. But not certainty either. A flicker of something unsteady passed through his thoughts, like a memory trying to surface through fog. A place that looked similar. Rocks. Heat. Silence. Orders given without explanation. He pushed the thought aside, focusing again on what was in front of him. This land was left to me, he said. I inherited it. That is all. The girl did not argue. She simply watched him, her expression unchanged, her voice quiet when she spoke again. Sometimes things are given back, she said, not just passed down. Daniel did not respond immediately. His attention shifted back to the opening, to the markings inside, to the sense of something unfinished that pressed quietly against the edges of his awareness. He tightened his grip on the panel once more, then pulled it open just a little wider. The gap expanded enough now for him to see further inside. The chamber extended deeper than he first thought, the inner wall only the beginning of a larger space beyond. The light touched the floor this time. Smooth. Even. Not natural. Constructed. He inhaled slowly, the cool air from inside filling his lungs, carrying with it that same faint, unfamiliar scent. "This is bigger than a storage space," he said under his breath. Rex remained at his side, steady as ever, his presence a constant in a place that felt anything but stable. Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the darkness ahead, his voice quieter now, almost to himself. "This is something else." Behind him, the girl's voice came one more time, softer than before, but clearer than anything else in the silence. "Yes," she said. "It always was." Daniel did not hesitate this time. The moment the realization settled in his chest, something in him shifted from observing to acting. He adjusted his grip on the panel and pulled it wider, slow and controlled, until the opening was large enough for his shoulder to pass through. The concrete edge scraped lightly against the surrounding rock, a quiet resistance that sounded louder than it should have in the stillness around them. Rex stepped forward immediately, positioning himself beside the opening, his body angled protectively as if he understood the threshold mattered. Daniel glanced at him, then nodded once. "Stay close," he said quietly. The dog did not need the instruction. Daniel leaned forward and guided the flashlight deeper into the space, then followed, ducking slightly as he moved through the narrow gap. The temperature changed instantly. Outside, the air had been dry and warm from the late sun. Inside, it was cooler. Still. Undisturbed. The kind of air that had not moved in years. His boots met the ground inside with a soft, solid contact. Not loose gravel. Not dirt. A finished surface. Smooth and even beneath his weight. He straightened slowly, the beam of the flashlight widening across the interior as his eyes adjusted. The chamber was larger than he expected. Not massive, but intentional. The walls were straight, reinforced, the same material as the outer seal. Everything about it spoke of purpose. Not storage. Not temporary shelter. Something designed to last. Rex followed without hesitation, slipping through the opening and standing just behind Daniel's left side. His breathing was steady, his posture alert, his eyes moving across the space with a focus that mirrored Daniel's own. Daniel swept the light across the nearest wall again, tracing the markings he had seen from outside. Up close, they were clearer. Faded but precise. Lines etched or stamped into the surface, not scratched or improvised. He reached out and brushed his fingers lightly over one of the sequences, feeling the shallow grooves beneath his fingertips. Real. Permanent. These were meant to be read, he said quietly. The beam moved further along the wall, revealing more of the chamber. A narrow metal shelf extended along one side, its surface coated in a thin layer of dust that had settled undisturbed. On it sat several objects, each placed with care. Not scattered. Not abandoned. Arranged. Daniel stepped closer, the light focusing on the nearest item. A sealed container. Rectangular. Military design. No markings on the outside, but the shape alone told him enough. His chest tightened slightly. "This is not random," he said again, more firmly this time. Rex moved one step forward, his nose lifting slightly as if catching a scent that lingered just beneath the surface of the still air. He did not touch anything. He simply observed. Daniel shifted the beam to the floor. More lines. Not markings this time. Tracks. Not recent. Faint impressions left in the material before it had fully set or perhaps worn in over time. Patterns that suggested movement. Repetition. Use. He followed the direction of those lines with the flashlight, leading deeper into the chamber toward the far wall. That was when he saw it. A second structure inside the room. Not a wall this time. A door. Smaller. Reinforced. set into the back of the chamber with the same deliberate precision as everything else. It was closed. Sealed in a different way. Not hidden. Just final. Daniel slowed as he approached, each step measured, his attention narrowing to the details in front of him. The surface of the door was smoother than the outer wall, the edges cleaner, the seams tighter. Whatever was behind it was meant to stay separate even from this hidden space. He stopped a few feet away, the flashlight beam steady on the center of the door. His breathing remained controlled, but his thoughts moved faster now, connecting pieces that had not made sense before. The codes. The chamber. The arrangement. This was not just a place to hide something, he said quietly. This was a place to protect it. Behind him, the girl's voice came again, softer now, but present even inside the sealed space. Yes. Daniel did not turn this time. He kept his eyes on the door, on the weight of what stood in front of him. Then whatever is behind that, he continued, his voice steady but lower, is the reason all of this exists. Rex stepped closer to his side, his shoulder nearly touching Daniel's leg, his attention fixed on the same point. The room remained silent. No movement. No sound beyond their breathing. And yet the space did not feel empty. It felt like it had been waiting. Daniel took one slow breath, then another, grounding himself in the moment. The past pressed at the edges of his mind again, clearer now, closer than before. Not a memory fully formed, but a direction. A pull. He raised the flashlight slightly, illuminating the full outline of the inner door, and for a brief second, something in his expression changed. Not fear. Not doubt. Recognition. I think I know what this is, he said quietly. And for the first time since stepping inside, that realization did not feel like a question. It felt like the beginning of an answer. Daniel did not reach for the inner door right away. His hand hovered at his side, fingers slightly curled, as if something instinctive was telling him that this moment mattered more than the others. The flashlight beam stayed fixed on the center of the door, illuminating its smooth, unmarked surface. No handle. No keypad. No visible mechanism. Just a sealed boundary that felt deliberate in a different way than the outer wall. This was not meant to be hidden. This was meant to be respected. Rex shifted beside him, his posture tightening just enough for Daniel to notice. The dog's ears angled forward then slightly back, adjusting to something subtle in the space. Not a sound. Not a movement. Something else. Daniel glanced down at him. You feel it too, he said quietly. Rex did not look away from the door. Daniel exhaled slowly, then took one step closer. The air near the door felt cooler than the rest of the chamber, almost as if the space beyond it held its own atmosphere, separate from everything else. He raised his hand and placed it flat against the surface. The contact was immediate. Solid. Unyielding. But there was something beneath it. Not movement. Not vibration. Just a faint sense of depth, like touching the surface of something that extended far beyond what could be seen. His jaw tightened slightly. This is not just storage, he said under his breath. Behind him, the girl's voice came again, softer than before but clearer than the silence around them. No. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second, steadying himself. When he opened them again, the past came closer than it had all day. Not fully formed. Not complete. But enough to shift his breathing. A corridor. Concrete. Doors like this one. Identical in design. Identical in purpose. He had walked past them before. He knew he had. Containment, he said quietly, the words slipping out before he could stop it. Rex let out a low breath, his body leaning forward just slightly, as if the word itself carried weight. Daniel stepped back half a pace, his eyes narrowing as he studied the edges of the door more carefully. There were seams, but tighter than the outer wall. Reinforced. Designed to hold under pressure. Not to keep something out. To keep something in. This was not built to protect the outside world, he said slowly. It was built to protect whatever is inside, from getting out. The realization settled heavily in the room, changing the air without moving it. Daniel's grip tightened slightly on the flashlight. He swept the beam along the edges again, searching for any sign of how it might open. Nothing obvious. No external controls. No simple access point. His mind moved through possibilities, through patterns he had not used in years but had never truly forgotten. If this follows the same structure, he murmured, thinking out loud now, then the access point is not here. Behind him, gravel shifted. Not much. Just enough to break the stillness. Daniel turned sharply, the flashlight beam cutting across the chamber in a quick arc. The opening behind them. The outer wall. The space where the girl had been standing. She was still there. Exactly where she had been. Watching. Calm. Unchanged. But something about her presence felt different now. Not unfamiliar. Just clearer. You knew what this was, Daniel said, his voice lower, more direct. The girl met his gaze without hesitation. I knew you would remember, she said. The words landed harder than anything else she had said so far. Daniel's brow tightened. Remember what? He asked. The girl did not answer immediately. Instead, she took a small step forward, just enough to stand at the edge of the chamber without crossing fully inside. You were not supposed to forget, she said softly. Daniel shook his head once, slow, controlled. I do not forget things like this, he said. But even as he spoke, the certainty in his voice wavered just enough to be noticed. The memory pressed closer again. Stronger this time. A briefing. A map. Coordinates marked in a place that looked very much like this one. A project name he could not quite reach. His breathing changed, just slightly. Rex stepped closer to him, his shoulder brushing against Daniel's leg again, grounding him in the present. Daniel looked back at the door, then at the markings on the wall, then at the girl. The pieces were not separate anymore. They were connecting. Slowly. Relentlessly. This was not just hidden, he said quietly. It was assigned. The girl nodded once. Yes. Daniel's eyes returned to the door, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. And I think I was part of it. The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt like confirmation. Daniel did not speak again right away. The words he had just said hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar, yet impossible to take back. He was part of it. The idea did not feel like a conclusion. It felt like something that had always been there, waiting for him to finally say it out loud. He turned slowly back toward the inner door, the flashlight beam steady in his hand, but his thoughts moving faster now, sharper, pulling fragments together that had once been scattered and sealed away just like this place. If I was part of this, he said quietly, then I would know how to open it. Rex shifted beside him, his posture tightening again, his focus locked not just on the door, but on Daniel himself now, as if sensing the change. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the surface again, this time not as an outsider, but as someone trying to remember what had once been routine. The seams. The spacing. The placement. Not random. Never random. He moved the flashlight slowly along the edges, then stopped. There. A difference so slight it would have been invisible to anyone not looking for it. A narrow indentation along the right side, no wider than a fingertip, running vertically about shoulder height. Daniel raised his hand and pressed lightly against it. Nothing happened. He adjusted his position, angling his palm differently, applying pressure not straight in, but slightly downward. A faint sound followed. Not loud. Not mechanical in the obvious sense. More like a release. A shift inside the structure itself. Rex's ears snapped forward. The air in the chamber changed again, just enough for Daniel to feel it against his skin. The door did not swing open. It moved back. Slowly. Controlled. As if guided by something that still functioned exactly as it was designed to. A thin gap appeared along the edge, widening inch by inch. Daniel stepped back instinctively, giving it space, his eyes fixed on the opening as it revealed what lay beyond. Darkness again at first. Then the flashlight beam reached inside. And this time, the light did not disappear. It reflected. Surfaces. Organized. Structured. The space beyond was not empty. It was a room. Smaller than the outer chamber, but far more precise. Everything inside had been arranged with intention. Shelving units lined the walls, each holding sealed containers, files, and equipment that had not been touched in years. Not abandoned. Preserved. Daniel's breath slowed again, his focus narrowing to what he was seeing. "This is a records room," he said quietly. The words came without hesitation now. Not guessed. Known. He stepped forward carefully, crossing the threshold into the inner space, the flashlight sweeping across the shelves. Labels. Codes. Dates. The same structure as the markings outside, but more detailed. More specific. Rex followed closely, his body brushing past Daniel's leg as he entered, then stopping just inside, his attention shifting from shelf to shelf as if tracking something deeper than sight. Daniel moved toward the nearest shelf, his hand hovering over one of the containers before finally lifting it. It was lighter than he expected. He turned it slightly, bringing the label into the light. His eyes locked onto the text. His name. Not fully spelled out. Not formally written. But unmistakable. A designation he had not seen in years. A shortened version used only in one place. One context. His chest tightened sharply, but his grip remained steady. "This is my file," he said, his voice low, controlled, but no longer uncertain. Behind him, the girl stepped into the chamber for the first time, her presence quiet but immediate. "Yes," she said softly. Daniel did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the container, his mind moving through the implications faster than he could speak them. "This was not just something I worked on," he continued. "This was assigned to me." He opened the container slowly, careful, deliberate. Inside were documents. Clean. Preserved. Organized in a way that suggested they had been sealed immediately after being placed there. He lifted the top file, the paper stiff but intact, and brought it into the beam of the flashlight. The header alone was enough to shift everything. Project designation. Location coordinates. Status. His breathing changed again, just slightly, as the final piece settled into place. "This was never decommissioned," he said. The realization was not loud. It did not need to be. It was complete. Rex stepped closer, his presence steady as ever, his eyes moving between Daniel and the room as if anchoring him in the present. Daniel lowered the file just enough to see further into the room, his gaze sweeping across the shelves, the containers, the preserved silence of everything that had been left behind. "It was just hidden," he finished quietly. And in that moment, the truth was no longer buried. It was standing right in front of him, waiting to be understood. Daniel stood still for a long moment, the file held steady in his hands as if moving too quickly might break whatever fragile connection had just formed between his past and the present. The flashlight beam remained fixed on the page, but his eyes were no longer reading. They were remembering. Not in full images. Not in complete scenes. But in fragments that no longer felt distant. A room like this. The same kind of shelves. The same quiet precision. Orders given in low voices. Instructions that were never written down outside of places like this. He exhaled slowly, then lowered the file just enough to look around the room again, this time with a different understanding. "This was not meant to disappear," he said quietly. "It was meant to wait." Rex shifted beside him, his shoulder brushing against Daniel's leg again, grounding him as always. The dog's eyes moved across the shelves, then back to Daniel, steady and present. Daniel placed the file back into the container with care, aligning it exactly as he had found it, as if respecting the order of something that had been preserved for a reason. He closed the lid gently. "This place holds records," he continued, his voice calmer now, more certain. "Assignments. Operations. People." His gaze drifted to the rows of containers stretching along the wall. Not just me. Behind him, the girl's voice came again, softer than ever, but still clear. No. Daniel turned slightly, finally looking at her fully inside the room. For the first time, the light touched her differently. Not brighter. Not clearer. Just more real. And yet something about her presence still did not match the rest of the space. You brought me here, he said. The girl shook her head gently. You came, she said. Daniel studied her for a second longer, then nodded once, accepting the difference without arguing it. He turned back toward the doorway, toward the outer chamber, and then beyond that, the opening that led back into the fading daylight. The world outside felt far away now, even though it was only a few steps beyond the wall. This cannot stay hidden, he said quietly. The words did not carry urgency. They carried weight. Decision. Rex took a small step forward, as if responding to the shift in Daniel's tone. Daniel reached down and rested his hand briefly on the dog's neck again. We are not leaving it like this, he added. The girl watched him, her expression unchanged, but her eyes softer now, as if something had settled. That is why it waited, she said. Daniel paused at the threshold of the inner room, glancing back one last time at the shelves. The containers, the preserved silence of everything that had been kept out of sight. Then he stepped back into the outer chamber, Rex moving with him in perfect sync. The air shifted slightly as they crossed the boundary, warmer again, less still, but the weight of what they had found did not lift. Daniel moved toward the opening in the wall, the fading sunlight casting longer shadows across the floor now. He stepped through the gap and back onto the uneven rock outside, blinking once as his eyes adjusted to the natural light again. The sky had begun to soften into early evening, the horizon stretching wide and open in a way that felt almost unreal after the enclosed space behind him. Rex stepped out beside him, then turned back once, looking toward the opening as if marking it, memorizing it. Daniel followed that gaze for a brief moment, then reached back and pulled the panel partially into place. Not fully closed. Not sealed. Just enough to protect what was inside until he returned. He turned around slowly, scanning the quiet landscape, the wind brushing lightly across the rocks again, carrying no answers but no longer hiding the questions either. Then he looked back toward where the girl had been standing. She was not there. The space was empty. No footprints. No movement. Just the same stillness that had been there before she ever appeared. Daniel did not call out. He did not search. He simply stood for a moment, letting the absence settle the same way her presence had. Then he nodded once, almost to himself, and turned away. Rex moved at his side as they began walking back across the rocky ground, the fading lights stretching their shadows long behind them. Daniel did not look back again. He did not need to. Because now he understood something that had been hidden far longer than the chamber itself. Some things are not lost. They are left. And sometimes they wait for the one person who is finally ready to see them again.